What if bringing your best to each moment can help you design a more meaningful legacy? I'd like to welcome Andrew to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely Friday. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Angelina, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is my honor to host you, and you're joining from the Toronto area of Ontario, Canada.
That's right. Yep. Oh, it's a little cold up here. I'm sure colder than where you are.
Yes. Well, welcome, welcome. Always love to have Canadians on the platform. So let's jump right in. And I shared with you in our prior conversations that I like to start with sometimes the challenge, the problem, the dilemma that somebody is facing in the story of their life, and then to transition over to the remedy of what it is that they've learned. So you've gone from being bedridden, hospitalized. Take us first to that dark moment where you were ultra successful. I think you were a pro athlete, and then you find yourself in this hospital room. And then we're going to talk about how you found the remedies.
That's a great question. So I wasn't actually a pro athlete at the time. I was a retired one, but I was still actually keeping quite fit, going to the track, going to the gym. Just a couple of weeks before this happened to me, I was at the track doing 200-meter sprints, 100-meter sprints, feeling at the top of my game. And it's a testament to just how drastically things can change and how quickly. So in 2016, I was away coaching some high performance athletes at a tournament. And I found myself I should mention that I started a fast. So I did a 36-hour fast. Actually, I intended to do a 3-day fast for the first time. In the past, I'd only ever done a 36-hour fast. But this time I said, yeah, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try 3 days. I think I can do it.
Yeah,
Well,
and so
about halfway, what's
let me
that?
interrupt you for a moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
so in your book, you talked about that, and you thought it was this great idea. You've done it before, but this time around, your body just wasn't ready for it. And even the people around you noticed something was wrong. You went to the convenience store, you tried to get some sugar, some small thing, and you couldn't even climb a set of stairs. And well, okay, keep going, please.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I had this debilitating energy low. I could barely move my arms and legs. I could barely get out of bed. It was terrifying. I didn't know what was going on. So I quickly abandoned the fast. Uh, Tried to get some food. I wasn't really cutting it. And eventually got in my car because I had this idea I needed some, like you said, sugar, some orange juice. So I headed towards the convenience store, and that's when things just dropped out. I had this incredibly intense vibrating sensation through my body. My hands started to curl inwards uncontrollably. I couldn't open my hands. I felt like I was going to pass out. And sure enough, called an ambulance. An ambulance arrived shortly thereafter, took me to the hospital, and they discovered that I was dangerously low in a blood marker called phosphate. So it's a mineral that you have in your body. And my phosphate was incredibly low at levels that are put you at risk of respiratory and heart failure. So it was not a good moment for me. I felt like I was going to die. It wasn't far off. The feeling was terrible. And eventually the doctors tested me. They discovered this. They put me on an IV to replenish my phosphate, which helped me feel a lot better pretty quickly. And initially, I thought it was over, but that was really just the beginning. And I would suffer these phosphate drops repeatedly. So something my body, for some reason, no longer had the ability to absorb phosphate. And phosphate is really important for energy development. So if you don't have phosphate, you can't, climb a set of stairs. Like you mentioned earlier, you know, eventually it came back and it came back hard. And I was hospitalized again. I was in ICU. Eventually, I got out of ICU after a few days, and I had to crawl up the stairs at my home to get to my bedroom. And I had to rest for about 45 minutes at the top of that staircase. And then I found myself in a terribly dark situation where I was in bed for the next 4.5 months for 22 hours a day, unable to work, unable to support my family, unable to look after my kids, unable to exercise, and unable to do any things that I loved. And it was a terrifying time in my life. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever recover, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got a couple of notes from your book. You talked about your health over that 5 year period and that you couldn't overdo exercise. You found yourself in a wheelchair at one moment, and you had to strengthen your mind at that point. And I think that's when you leaned back into athletic principles. But I want to go to the book for a moment. And I know that
Sure.
there's some amazing testimonials at the very beginning of others in the industry that work in sports and all many different niches of society that have provided rave reviews. You started with in the book strengthening the heart and then the mind with the spirit last. And I wondered to steer yourself out of this area where you found yourself, having to manage emotional lows as a now regular setback as a part of life and your lifestyle. how did you maneuver in terms of the sequence of thinking about strengthening your heart first? Say more, because this is personal. There's many people
Mhm.
out there that find themselves in this position. So I thought this conversation was so important.
Yeah, it was emotional. I mean, I was in a dark place. I suffered depression. I was devastated by all the things that I lost, the things that I couldn't do, and I didn't know what to do. And I did draw heavily into my experience as a professional athlete and a high performance coach of athletes and business people. And what I eventually got to, of course, there's always that period where you're just floundering and you don't know what to do. But I eventually got to replacing those negative thoughts with positive actions. And positive actions are just so much more powerful. And so when we find ourselves in those situations, if we take meaningful actions to improve our circumstances, and you cannot even feel up to it at the moment, but if you make those actions, you're doing something positive to help your situation. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I had to rely on a lot of the grit, the determination, the willingness to do whatever it took to kind of improve my circumstances. Those all were things that I developed as an athlete and as a coach, and I had to rely on those to get me through. And immediately, so I went to doctors, specialists all over. Nobody could solve my problem. They all knew what it was, but they didn't know what a solution was or why it had happened to me. And there were many theories. Some people said mercury, some people said mold. Like there was lots of possibilities. Both of those things were in my environment.
And
And
Justin Bieber got Lyme disease.
yeah, so you just never know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I basically decided that diet was going to be the thing that was going to get me out, like food and what I ate. And I took kind of a computer programmer's approach and said, took the 14 things that I ate every day, whatever, 12 or 14. I just changed one at a time. And I made notes of like when I felt better, when I felt worse, I would keep changing things until slowly over the months, I developed a diet that seemed to give me better energy. And I was able to return to work initially 2 hours a day and then 3 hours a day. And as the diet got better, eventually I got up to like after about a year and a half, it took me to get to 7.5 hours. It was a long time. And eventually I got to this diet that really, really helped heal me, I guess, helped me rehabilitate and come to a place where I had nearly normal energy. So it was a massive improvement from lying in bed 22 hours a day to being able to work and support my family again, which was a huge relief. So taking those positive actions are what made the difference. And it would have been very easy to just get stuck in those negative thoughts and dark places and dark emotions because they were really pulling me in. And my everything in my around me kind of proved that those dark feelings had like a place. They were justified. So it was really about taking those first initial steps, starting small and moving sequentially through them to get myself out of that situation.
Yeah, I bring up this point because I find sometimes that adults, children as well, but many times adults can find themselves in this holding pattern in life and they don't know how to break out of that holding pattern. So it's like I just wanted to go to that slice of film for a moment where you found yourself stuck and trapped and you asked yourself, how do I go from this place of what you had called emotional lows and
Yeah.
being in that wheelchair, being in that hospital state, and then managing it for 5 years, trying to find the way out of the holding pattern. So if anyone is traded in the stock market, you can get these holding patterns, but the moment you can break out, it's such freedom. But I've seen in society sometimes when these hard times come, people don't know how to break out, and sometimes to hear a story of somebody else who has broken out can give them a little bit of inspiration and hope.
Yeah, I just didn't want to give up on myself, on my family, and I didn't want that to define who I was. And I wanted to believe very thoroughly and fully that I could get out. And once I hit that wall of like, I just have to do something to extricate myself from this. Like the doctors aren't kind of succeeding in this particular moment, though they do obviously succeed with a lot of people. It wasn't working for me. I had to find something. And so it all started with that determination, that deep down, base level desire just to get better and improve. And that's where it started. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have started, looking for the next steps, which, translated into doing something and finding solutions and then doing something on a daily basis and building on it from there.
Yeah, I want to read an excerpt from your book. You wrote, there can be a host of obstacles that can stop us in our tracks, like negative thinking, self sabotage, hurtful words from others, fears, setbacks, failures, and the occasional disaster, to just name a few. So
So true.
I know your goal was health recovery, and you read up on the science of change, personal transformation, as well as peak performance. And you also said what holds us back the most is our minds. So here's my question. What are the guiding principles that influenced you then and or influence your life now?
The main guiding principles are that, everything is a process. So you have to take concrete steps and actions to change your life. You can't just think about it. You can't just watch a video. You can't just post something on Instagram. You got to actually do meaningful things that are going to make improvements in your life. And that's really what this is all about. And a high performing mind walks people through steps that they can take to make significant improvements in their life that will lead towards, better results and better results, better performance, and better performance leads to better results and then more successes in your life. And so that's really what we're looking for. When you go into that interview, if you're not performing at your best, you're not likely to get that job. If your colleagues don't look at you and think that you're high performing, you're not going to get that $200,000 a year job offer, right? If you're not high performing, you're not going to achieve your goals, whatever that is, to have the best podcast in the world or to be, the top athlete in your country, whatever that might be. So it all stems from that at the root. And that's really, I have the philosophy of always doing my best, bringing my 100% to whatever I do. Doesn't mean that I'm always going to do a great job, but I always try to. And, I've developed from working with high performance athletes over many years. They've really at the cornerstone of like where, or that juncture where peak performance can be found. So I'm able to bring that into many areas in my life. And that's what the book teaches, bring it into your teaching if you're a teacher, bring it into your podcast if you're doing podcasts, or if you're an entrepreneur, bring it into how you're building your business. So whatever that might be, it's about bringing your best and then finding a way to bring that out of yourself when the moment, when it counts, when it matters the most.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. It's interesting some of the things that you're sharing. I remember growing up, my dad had said to me once that if you would like to succeed, you have to have two things. Number one, you have to want it, and number two, you have to be ready for it. Yeah.
Yep, I love that. Yep, yep.
So so speaking of desire and will, what is your desire to care about your legacy today?
What's my desire for my legacy?
What's
Well,
your
I mean,
desire to care about your legacy today?
well, I definitely care about my legacy, and I want to see, these ideas that I feel are so helpful to people. Like, I've worked with so many people over the years and walked them through that pathway from beginner to expert at what they do, and help them, achieve their goals, whatever their goals may be, in whatever pursuit that they're in. So what I really am passionate about for legacy is, having that be available to people everywhere. And so that is why I wrote the book, because it's amazing how people from all over the world in any country can pick it up. And I have people messaging me from all over the place, and it's quite uh, a meaningful and touching experience to hear that it is that people are enjoying it, that they do find the message is in the book meaningful and helpful. And I mean, that's everything to me. So that's where my legacy begins, is in helping people make meaningful changes in their lives and find substantial improvements to their circumstances. Like, they could be in a wheelchair, they could be a high performing athlete, they could be a CEO. It doesn't really matter where you are. It's about improving your circumstances to the best of your ability. So, you know, you may be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. That may mean you may not walk, but that doesn't mean you can't have an incredible life.
Yeah, thank you for speaking into that. I again think this is such an important conversation because when people find themselves and they get knocked down, they lose their sea legs, something happens and they're tested, their metal is tested to rebuild. And it could be different things for different people, but somebody's big deal is their big deal. You can't, pass judgment on the outside. But once somebody finds themselves in that place of, you called it an emotional low, somebody could call it a place of darkness. I
Hmm.
just think that then either the brain operates from a place of fear or a place of growth. And you got to shift that brain back over to that place of growth to even have somebody think about designing their legacy. So,
So true. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in the book, I talk a lot about like how going through difficult things strengthen us. Like, I find we live in a world a little bit where people are a lot more afraid than in the past to have their feelings hurt, or someone to say something that is offensive. I mean, look, that's not great. I'm not saying that it is, but it's important to recognize that you get thicker skin in those situations. You go through something difficult, you become a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient. So, like, we don't want to avoid those situations necessarily. We don't go looking for them. But when they do come along, if we have a bit of a positive attitude that we can learn and grow and expand and become a better, more capable human being, then it gives us that strength and resilience to carry on through and to get to that other side. And that other side is going to be better. So you have to keep that light at the end of the tunnel in the forward view mirror, your forward view, so that you are always striving towards that and keeping your sights on that, and that you can create that reality and not let all the negativity that you're in the moment pull you down and prevent you from getting where you want to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that negativity can consume people. So coaching has helped you through that time of your life, as well as probably many times. How does coaching, since I'm an advocate for coaching, I will plug it,
Yeah.
how does it bring out the best in you?
I mean, coaching is an incredible way to, I mean, from a coaching perspective, coaching is incredibly enjoyable. You get to collaborate with people and help them get to wherever they want to get to. I've got two kids, one who wants to be a high performing athlete, and one who wants to enjoy his life. And I kind of meet them wherever they are and help them achieve their goals, whatever they may be. Coaching helped me immensely in my life. I certainly had my mentors in my life and they helped me with their wisdom. You know, they've walked the path before and they could give me these stepping stones to help me achieve my goal. So, I mean, it was profoundly helpful to me through a big period of my life. And you know, I try to do the same. I try to emulate my role models who were my coaches when I coach and pass things on to my students. And at the same time, being very mindful not to give them too much because it's so important for them to learn on their own. The learning is a lot deeper when, you know, you come to that realization on your own. So I don't give people every single answer. It's about leading them there so that they can, you know, get them looking in the right places so that they can discover. And then it just means so much more and it goes so much more deeper and it propels them forward so much more quickly. So we can certainly help. And that's what we coaches do. But, you know, I think what I learned over the years with coaching is I became a minimalist in a way. So I help. I never let them sink, but I always help just the right amount. And I probably was guilty many times of helping too much. So I've learned that balance as time has gone on, and I've become a lot more efficient coach. I don't know if you feel the same way, but like what I did 20 years ago in my coaching would take me, you know, 6 times or 10 times as long that I can achieve today. And like, so one session today would be the equivalent of like 8 or 10, you know, 20 years back kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think about some of the great coaches, and they can be in the world of personal development, but they could also be in that world of sports. Like you come from
Hmm.
that world of athletics. And um, there was a coach, I think his name was Phil Jackson.
Oh
I
yeah, he's amazing.
for the
Yeah.
Lakers.
Yes.
Yeah, and he had conversations with Kobe and different players, and he said, "Listen, I might not be able to physically do what you can do, but from an outside perspective, I can watch you on the court, see your blind spots, and deliver value." So that's why
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you that question. I realized I was putting you on the spot a little bit regarding how does coaching bring out the best in you, because it's personal in the testimony. That's why I was
So
curious.
true. It's so true. I mean, like when two people come together to achieve a common goal, I think there's incredible power in that. You're definitely magnified more than the sum of just two. It's more like the sum of 10. So I think there's a great power in collaboration, and I love that. It's one of my favorite things to be part of a high performing team. And anytime you partner up with somebody to achieve something, you're immediately part of a high performing team. So when you have that intent in your mind and your heart to achieve greatness and you're working with somebody, they can certainly draw it out of you. And I'll give a great example. Like when I was coaching one athlete who was about 20 in the world in the sport, like incredible. He would ask questions that I didn't necessarily know the answer to in that moment because it was something I hadn't considered before, but he drew it out of me. I found the best answer for him in that moment. So there's some really incredible energy dynamic that takes place between people where that is that comes together and through that collaboration where you know that person by asking, you know, by virtue of asking the question, they draw that knowledge from you, and it just helps you look at things from a little bit of a different perspective, and then you can provide that help that they need to achieve their goals.
Awesome, brilliant. You stated in your book that mindset can help us get through the tough moments. So I'm going to keep you in the hot seat for a little longer.
Sure.
What was or is it for you regarding that statement that mindset can help us get through the tough moments?
I mean, if you have the right attitude, attitude is everything, right? So if you fail and don't think you've done anything wrong or don't think that there's anything to change or improve, then you're not going to learn, you know? But if you have the mindset that there's always something to learn in every failure and every mistake, then you're open to it and then you can draw the wisdom that will come from that situation. You know, I say one of the quotes from my book is you're you're 10 minutes after you fail. Sorry, you're the same person 10 minutes after you fail, only wiser. So it's just a good perspective that attitude dictates, right? So if you have a good attitude and you're willing to reflect a little bit, then you have that opportunity to learn and grow from your situation. And one thing we do say in sport a lot is losing is learning. So again, it helps train that correct attitude. And that's where coaching can come in and be helpful to people, is that you can remind people that, yes, you just failed. It feels terrible in this moment, but what did you learn? And that's what I talked about earlier about guiding people to the answer. I'm not going to tell them what they learned. It's for them to kind of pull it out of themselves. What was important? What was poignant in that moment for them? What is going to really propel them to that next level, so that the next time they're in a similar situation, they can succeed instead of fail. So that's what it
Yeah.
comes down to. So attitude is the short answer, but by having the mindset, there's so many different mindsets. A growth mindset, always willing to learn, always doing your best. All those things, they're very powerful. And when you have those to fall back on, they can get you through those dark times.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're speaking into failure. I predominantly focus on coaching next gen family members, and there can be such incredible pressure on them. And so when you think about this idea of failure, sometimes individuals that are perfectionist in nature can crumble underneath this idea of like, I failed. And because of that tremendous pressure. So let me also bring up something that you wrote about in your book. You said you aren't failing when, sorry about that, you aren't failing when it isn't going well. Uh, and so I wanted to ask you regarding the positive mindset piece. What have been your best aha moments? Like when you're saying you aren't failing when it isn't going well. Was it a physical moment? Like let's say if you couldn't make it up that flight of stairs, or was it another aha moment in your personal journey?
Yes, I mean it's both is a short answer. So, I wanted to write a book for a long time, before I was ever ill, but being ill is what really made this book much better than it ever would have been. And I think it has a potential to be able to connect with people a lot more in a much more meaningful way than it would have before. It was more geared towards high performance people when I was originally thinking about it. And now it's geared towards everybody. And where does that come from? Well, having had that incredible physical failure in my life and having had to get through those dark times and those physically debilitating moments where I wasn't able to do things like go up a flight of stairs or go to work and all those things. So the learning that came in those moments are what gave me the wisdom or the knowledge to be able to write this book and provide this type of information to people that I believe is a lot more impactful, and from what the feedback I'm getting is a lot more impactful, and more helpful to people. So I mean that's really the key thing. It's like, you asked me what my aha moment was. Well, that was a year and a half aha moment. I certainly had other ones, briefer ones. I remember one time I was competing against really a strong athlete. He was top 50 in the world, and I was close to winning, and I started to think about it a little bit too much, and I ended up losing that match, and I should have won that day. I just, didn't kind of have the right mental state of mind to get through it in a positive way. It was my opportunity that I kind of missed out on. And so the aha moment in that particular situation was that I needed to go back and work harder in a particular area of my game. So it was a realization that part of my game had kind of let me down. And, so yeah, I needed to be a little mentally stronger, and it was possible, but had that part of my game been better, then I would have made it through. So your mental profile is really important, but your capabilities are more important. So, you can have the strongest mindset, but if you don't have the training to back it up, you're not going to get through that situation. The more practice you get, the more reps you put in, and that's true for every element of life. The more times we are in difficult conversations, the better we get at finding our way to navigate those and come up with more positive outcomes. So, you know, it's through that process that you improve and get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. My phone's decided just to make all this noise right now. I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to decline that. People should know that I'm trying to record right now. Anyways, I appreciate that you speak into that, because I think sometimes with failure, I think what you're speaking to is this opportunity for preparation, an opportunity to have a debrief, an opportunity to see it from all these different perspectives, compared to looking at failure like there's like this tsunami of shame coming over a person. So let
Yeah.
me transition into this idea of weaknesses. And
Mm.
you've often said that it's good to focus on strengths, but it's also good to strengthen one's weaknesses. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to keep you again in the hot seat for a little bit
Yeah.
longer. What has been one of your top weaknesses, and then how did you build uh, muscle strength there, whether it was a mental weakness or a physical weakness? Because again, sometimes people think about their weaknesses and they're afraid to go there. They're afraid to look at it because, again, of this idea of shame or perfectionism. And so it's interesting in the world. I think it's like 1 out of 5 people are narcissistic, but in LA, it's like 1 out of 4. And so you got all these people that like don't want to talk about weaknesses. They don't want to get real. They don't want to confront those weaknesses. They don't want to have those honest conversations. And sometimes those individuals that have narcissistic tendencies are the executives, are the ones that rise to the top. And so you never get this opportunity to look at weaknesses. So,
Yeah, I think that like it takes more strength to look at your weaknesses than it does not to, you know? So often people think it's a sign of weakness to admit that you have weaknesses. It's actually a sign of strength. I
correct.
think, you know, and you know, we
Maturity.
talked a little bit about perfectionism. I just want to dive in there just because perfectionism, that's not what doing your best is all about. Perfectionism is actually something that gives you diminishing return for your time over time. So it's
Oh, say
great to
that
strive.
again. Say that
Oh,
again. I didn't know
uh,
that.
yeah, well, I said perfectionism brings diminishing return over time.
Yeah.
And is that the part that you want me to repeat?
Yeah. I'd never heard that before. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, you're going to put so much effort, like 90% to perform at the 95% level, but to get that 100%, sometimes it's like a massive differential on top of that. It's just there's a diminishing return. So look, you aim for perfect, you aim for your best, but when you don't achieve that, you kind of settle with what you did unless there's more work to do to get to where you want to get to. But you know, on a particular day, you're not going to beat yourself up because you didn't perform at your best. Like not every interview is going to be your best. Not every speech is going to be your best. Not every game is going to be your best. You have to accept that and just do the best you can in that particular moment. So if you're trying to be perfect, that definitely has a diminishing return over time because you are going to create stress in your life. You're going to put an inordinate amount of time into trying to be perfect. But, you know, being really good is often enough to get you through most situations. I will tell you, as an athlete, it was so rare that any of the athletes, myself and any of the athletes as a coach that I worked with, ever achieved their best game. You can count on that about 10% of the time. So if you're trying to be perfect, you're going to be disappointed a lot of your life.
Yeah. I'm glad you, again, speaking of that. Sometimes I think parents can expect children to be perfect, especially when there's money involved. And I just appreciate what you said about the diminishing returns. There's also a chart about wealth and diminishing returns. People think more money, more happiness, and yet
Yeah.
it kind of caps off somewhere. I don't know if it's 200 or 300,000, somewhere that really, when somebody gets more, it doesn't change their lifestyle or joy that much more. And so again,
Mm.
people have this idea if I'm more perfect, if I am just more affluent, and yet that's an illusion because
Oh, true.
yeah,
Yeah. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about like weaknesses and like, so one of the things I talk about in the book is if you improve your biggest weakness, you get the greatest amount of improvement at the fastest possible rate in your life. So if there's something holding you back, it's certainly worthwhile to address that. And, you know, I used that example earlier of, you know, in that particular match, I discovered that a part of my game was letting me down. So, you know, I spent my takeaway from that was that I decided I was going to spend 2 hours every day on top of my normal 4 hours of training a day at the time to work on that particular weakness. And that just brought dividends for the rest of my life. You know, I got better at it slowly. It certainly didn't come quickly. It was something that I wasn't particularly naturally talented at. So I had to work at it perhaps a little harder than others. The results came slowly, but they were lasting. And I was able to enjoy that improvement for the rest of my life. So if there's something that's holding you back, it could be a vice, it could be something else. You know what that is. If there's some area of, you know, your life that you know that if you kind of made that improvement to your biggest weakness or that biggest thing that's holding you back, that everybody around you will appreciate it so much more, or that you'll have better results in your business or your pursuits or whatever that is, it's certainly worthwhile doing. So I definitely encourage people to have a look at that and consider if it's going to make a meaningful change in their life or not.
yeah, and also better design their legacy, but on bump. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
One other thing that you said in your book, and then we'll close it out with some legacy specific questions, was you had said it's not how far you fall, it's how far you bounce back, and
Yeah,
owning what has happened as compared to denying it, and the accountability piece. And
so true.
yeah, would you speak more about that? Because sometimes when people fall, I mean, love him or hate him, Donald Trump fell, and yet
Yeah,
he bounced back.
yeah.
So, and I
He's a
think
res
he's connected to the world of wrestling. I don't think he wrestled, but I'm sure he has some type of sports element in his background.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, for sure, resilience is a huge part of that. And the quote is actually, it's not how far you fall, but how high you bounce. And I wish I wrote that one, but I've actually known about that since I was about 16 years old. I think I used it as my quote in my high school yearbook because it was such a meaningful statement to me at the time, something, that I kind of tried to remember whenever I was going through difficult times. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind that those dark times and those hard moments are catalysts for, those future high points down the road when you've kind of learned the things that you needed to do to create that better reality. So I think it's a really important piece. And, I guess you were asking a little bit about the resilience piece, but resilience is so critical for getting to where you want to go. Like if you aren't resilient and you give up prematurely, you're obviously never going to get there. If you let those mistakes or those initial failures and setbacks stop you from continuing, you're never going to get there. So like if you don't have resilience, you're never going to be able to create that life you want. It'll just be a series of disappointments. So being resilient is really important. And I do talk a lot about how to develop your resilience. And one key thing is so simple. It's just recognize that it's going to be hard. Recognize that, you decided to start a company. It's not going to be easy. Just that recognition alone mentally prepares you for all the difficulties you're going to face. Like I'm sure in this whole process of creating this incredible podcast that you've put together, that you have had your disappointments, you've had your hard moments, you've had your failures and your setbacks, but you persevered and now you're enjoying the fact that this is one of the top 5% podcasts that there are, which is an incredible accomplishment because there are so many out there. So, I mean, you know personally that process that you have to go through. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Well, I think one of the things that can sometimes break a person, it's not like the one thing, it's like the thing, it's not the straw that breaks the camel's back, it's everything that leads up to it. And so I think sometimes when they're the naysayers, and it's like if you've ever been around chickens and the chickens will peck. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes if you have like that one strong person in your corner, that can make a difference. And other times, when there is success, there can be envy and jealousy.
So true. I actually devote an entire chapter to that because I've worked with people who've had some diabolical situations where people have come up and just like athletes have good armor, but they also have their incredible vulnerabilities. And if someone comes up after you perform and they say something that kind of cuts in, it can really throw you for a loop and really impact your confidence. So it's so important not to take anything anybody says or does personally. And that's what chapter 5 is all about. And if you can do that, I kind of give some strategies how you can approach that. It's just so helpful because you're going to have your moments. I've had people tell me that I would never succeed with this book because I didn't have enough, I'm not famous to start. So, you hear these things and you note them and, there's probably a good point hidden in there that you can use some valuable feedback. And I certainly tried to draw from whatever criticisms I heard along the way. And as you do, you continue forward anyway. If it's something you're passionate about and you care about, nobody can predict your future. Nobody knows what you're capable of except for you. And sometimes you don't even know until you try. So you got to keep at it. Don't take what other people say personally. Don't let it impact your enthusiasm. Keep at it, keep working. And if you see the light at the end of the tunnel, drive towards it, and eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So, since this is a legacy podcast, what does this word mean to you personally?
Legacy.
Yes.
I mean, legacy is it's deep. I mean, it's all about how we impact others, in my opinion. So it's the mark that we leave on the world when we move on, and then perhaps even for some, even before that. I can think of some incredible figures in history who certainly left an incredible mark on the world, even during their lifetime, like a Gandhi or a Nelson Mandela. And there's others who have been inspiring to people, some great athletes or business people or whatever that might be. So legacy is big, it's deep, and it's about who you are and what kind of lasting effect and impact you have on the world. So I think there's few things more important in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, thank you for speaking into that. I think individuals that have had kind of a near-death life experience, they either come out of that and they really value their life, or like you had said, they can get stuck in that holding pattern. So thank you for,
Hmm.
yeah. In 1 to 2 sentences, what would you like your legacy to be?
Um, I think most importantly, it would be that people have felt that interacting with me in my lifetime has been a net positive for them. that I've been helpful to them in some way, that they feel that they can live a little bit better life in some way, and then perhaps they'll pass that on to others. And some of these helpful ideas can transcend me in my time here. Uh, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I'm drawing from in this book about the way I was raised and the things that were values that were communicated from me, from my parents, and from their grandparents, and so on. And that's how I'd like to see it continue, because I feel some of these messages have been a little bit clouded and lost in the world these days. The world of instant gratification and technology. It's a tough place to be sometimes, and I'd really like to see people get back to sort of a more appreciative approach of what it takes to kind of create that life that they want, so they don't give up so easily, so that they persevere through those difficult moments, and that they keep trying to get to where they want to get to. Because everybody, like, I just want to see people happy and enjoying themselves and their lives, right? And so when people can't do that, I'm hoping that the methods that I provide in the book will help them get to where they want to get to.
Yeah, thank you for speaking into that. And you mentioned a moment ago about values and your parents. What do you think might be your, let's say, top 3 or 4 values today that influence your decisions? And this is I think, a vital question, because people can either come from a decision-making process based on their reactions and fears, or they can become very aware and proactive and say, I'm going to choose my decisions based on my values. So if you could brainstorm maybe three or
Yeah.
four values, what might they be?
Well, one thing I write about in the book is accept what's going wrong and stay focused on what you want. And I think that's an important value to me. Things are always going to go wrong. Things are going to be challenging. And as you stay focused on what you want, it propels you in the direction that you want to go. And it's a much more positive way to live. But I have a lot of other values. I value hard work. I value bringing my best to the equation. When I was young, I quickly connected that when I performed well in my life, whether it was in relationships or my sport or at work or whatever it was, that good things came my way. People liked me more. I got better results, and I performed better at work, which led to promotions and to, job opportunities and pay raises and all those wonderful things. So that's something I really value, is bringing your best to everything that you do. And by doing that, you don't feel that regret from not having succeeded when you don't, because you did your best. And when you fail, you can forgive yourself because you did your best. So bringing your best to the equation of everything you do it's a very healing and powerful thing. It helps you let go of the past, and it also helps you achieve the things that you want to achieve in your life. So that's certainly a really important one for me. And then obviously work hard and put time in. You're never going to get anywhere without a little bit of discipline in your life. Like, discipline is all about doing something daily to get to where you want to get to, right? So a little bit of discipline goes a long way. So you're not going to create that $1 million business unless you're putting time in on a daily basis. Like, it's incredible how much time, like, even just launching this book, I have a career as well in the hospitality industry. And that takes an incredible amount of time already. So in every free moment, I'm working towards getting this book out there in the world. And, it takes a lot of time. So you got to be willing to do the hard work, and it pays huge dividends down the road. The more time you put in, the more you get out of it, the quicker you succeed, right? So that's why there's incredible value in working hard. And then, I also, there's some other values that I have, of course, like integrity and truth. I think those are incredibly important, and also bring you a long way in life. And being sincere in your approach, and being passionate about what you care about, and not letting what other people think about that really hold you back. I think those are such important things.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. The interesting thing about working smart is that you have to work hard first. Because when you work hard, then you get all these nuances of the details of what it takes to make something happen, what it
So
takes to make
true.
something successful. Well, you have to first get in there and do the hard work. And there's that joke. It only took me 10 years to be an overnight success, but yeah,
Yeah, people like to say work smarter, not harder, but really honest, it's both. You just nailed it. Like, I love what you said there about, like, you have to work hard first to, like, learn what it takes to work smart. Like, it's not just, you're not going to be able to just work smart from looking it up on the internet, because every situation is unique. My book launch is different from someone else's book launch. Your podcast is different from someone else's podcast. What everybody's doing in life is slightly unique. You have to learn yourself. And, like, that's another thing that I feel is a little bit lost in the world. Like, develop yourself, learn yourself, and master yourself. And when we go through that self mastery, you can excel at yourself and bring your best to the equation, and be your best when you go into that job interview, be your best when you're playing that sport or doing your podcast or whatever that is, right? So you got to learn yourself. And I feel like the art of self mastery is a little bit lost, or sometimes people are thinking about enlightenment, but mastery is also your own life, being the best mother you can be, being the best friend you can be, being the best husband or wife or partner you can be, whatever that is, we're always striving to improve. And by having that kind of mindset of wanting to improve and be the best you can be, it'll take you so far in every area of your life.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So, if you, and this is my final question, if you were to set aside a weekend or two a month to design a hardcover coffee table book, what images or stories would fill its pages
Oh, that's a tough
for
question.
the future generations, even 100 years from now?
I mean, I think it's funny. It sounds a little negative, but like some pictures and stuff of like struggle is sort of inspiring in a way because obviously not struggle that doesn't lead to a better place at the end of it. But, I think of some of those powerful black and white photographs of, a Gandhi or a Nelson Mandela to revisit those two again, and those inspiring moments, of changing the lives of hundreds of thousands of millions of people around the world. Like, so, if it was a picture coffee book, with a little bit of inspiration written in the sides, I'd love to see something of people who are inspiring first, in whatever field, and like share it around a little bit, have someone from, politics, someone from, socially, someone from sports, someone from business, and have that all there, pictures of these people who've done it. And also like those moments of struggle too, so that people can help understand that it's the struggle that helped create that greatness. And, they're incredibly inspiring people because of what they've been through in their lives. They become smarter, wiser, more capable human beings because they've learned through the challenges and difficulties that they faced. So, that's my answer. No one's ever asked me that question before, so now I know
Oh, that's
if I'm
good.
ever
That's
going to do a
good.
coffee table book, what it's going to be about. I can almost picture it now. So maybe I'll do one day.
Well, I think it's brilliant. And thinking about your kin 100 years from now, if I go back 100 years, it would have been it would have been 1924, and I think about my great grandparents, and it would have been right after I think the Spanish flu, and it's just interesting. And they did my on my father's side of the family, they kept the photos. On my mother's side of the family, they did not. But it's just fascinating to go back, and you just feel this connection to the roots and kind of what makes you you and what it is you pass on and what has influenced the small things on the inside and the outside, from the dress to how people dress to how even just little habits of, gosh, that's where that comes from. And it just you just, instead of having it get lost in time.
It's so true. And I think we see that a lot through the generations, right? Like I think about my grandmother and how much my dad was like her. And I know I have elements of both my parents, and I see elements of myself and my kids. And if we can help instill some of those values that we talked about earlier, as we go along, and whether it's through a book or whether it's through what you pass on to your children or your friends or wherever that might be, I think it's so important to pass the things on that are important to us, the things that have helped us in our lives. And I think that's really how we build the most meaningful, lasting legacy. And, it doesn't have to be a legacy that like has public levels of exposure. It can be something subtle, and who knows where things come from. Maybe it was some random 75-year-old woman in Wyoming. She said something to somebody once and it spread. Who knows? So, I mean, it's always possible. It's always possible. So, yeah, I think legacy is incredibly important that way.
Very cool. Any closing thoughts or a good website if somebody would like to learn more about your business or your book?
Yeah, I have a website with my book and some of the videos that I've recently put out from interviews like this, and it's andrewdthompson.com. So D is in dog, thompson.com, Thompson. So you can definitely Google that. It will come up. And I'm on all the social media channels now, even though that was something that I kind of avoided in the past because I found it to be a distraction. Now I'm relying on it so heavily to promote my book, which is funny because I have such meager followings, but they're growing pretty rapidly over the last couple months. So check back with me in a year. We'll see where they are.
Very cool, very cool. Well, social media is an interesting thing because sometimes it can be more about a loyal following. Yeah, because once you make that
Yeah,
connection, then yeah.
I agree with you. I think what if I've learned anything in the last little while, like it's all about like those, like I'm not gonna go buy a bunch of followers. Like it's about um, people finding you and then having people who care about what you're doing. I think that's really more powerful. So yeah, that's gonna be my excuse for having such small followings so far on all my platforms. I'm doing it the real way, and
Yeah.
it's a little
Well,
slow. Yeah, I
it's
am.
it'll be an authentic niche.
Yeah, I'm definitely putting like the only place I make an exception to that is YouTube because I find if people see me in a video, sometimes that helps them connect with my message, and so I find that to be more powerful. So I'm actually putting it out just recently, started putting it out there, but that would be about it. The rest of them, they're gonna have to grow as they grow to wherever they get to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting about video before I read my closing paragraph that if somebody can see you, it's like you become a real person.
That's powerful. Yeah, yeah, I like that. Yeah, or you're just an idea till then, right?
I wanted to take a moment to circle back to the intention we set for today's episode, which was what if bringing your best to each moment helps you design a more meaningful legacy? And I think we fulfilled that promise of the intention that was set. So I just would like to take a moment to thank you for being a guest. Some of the key points you brought up that is losing can be learning, and things might not always go right as a guiding principle. In fact, maybe things will always go wrong, but if you anticipate that, then you're more prepared in managing expectations. And thank you also for speaking into your values around hard work, bringing your best, as well as discipline.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate the chance to share my ideas with you and your listeners. So thanks so much.
It is my pleasure. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends, send an email to either Andrew or myself. So thank you so much for joining us this week, and thank you, Andrew, for speaking into your legacy.
Thank you.